Hi. As everyone talks about the Russia's special military operation in Ukraine, there are a lot of opinions about it. From the Ukrainian point of view, the special operation is an illegal invasion of its territory. From the Luhansk and Donetsk republics' point of view, the special operation is an act of support from Russia, through which they are liberated from the existential threat posed by Ukraine. In this presentation we will cover some aspects which hopefully will clarify which is the truth. We will discuss the situation in Ukraine in the context of similar events which occurred in history. These events are also the basis of the international law, widely recognized by the countries affiliated to the United Nations. In that way we can have a common point of view. We will discuss first about how a country is born, and we will apply these rules to the Luhansk and Donetsk republics. After that, we will see if there were in the past similar actions with the Russia's special operation and how the international community reacted to them. Finally, we will discuss about the status of the Ukrainian territories which are now controlled by Russia, but are not part of the Donbass. In order for a country to be born from another country, there are some conditions to be fulfilled. First, we need enough people to want that. If only a minority want independence, the process will in most cases not succeed. There are cases in which the independence is declared only for a minority, such as for the Turkish Cypriots in northern Cyprus, but at this case another country, Turkey, needs to maintain an army in that country, in order to protect the minority from the will of the majority. Second, we need to have a declaration of independence and the formation of national government bodies such as presidency, parliament, etc. In this phase, in many cases, the new government tries to legitimize itself by organizing referendums or elections. Based on the results of these referendums, one can say if most of the people want independence or not. Third, in most cases the parent country will oppose the independence. The new country needs to be sufficiently strong, or it needs to have strong friends in order to protect itself from the forced reintegration in the parent country. Let's discuss some well-known examples. These examples will give us the opportunity to answer to some very important questions. There are much more examples, but we will focus on how the United States, India and Kosovo were born. All these countries in the beginning were parts of other countries or empires. The United States and India were colonies of the British Empire, and Kosovo was part of Yugoslavia. In all cases, when the new country declared its independence, the parent country opposed. At first, in the new country there were attempts to obtain the independence in peaceful way. These attempts included appeals to the governors, peaceful meetings and demonstrations. Local ruling bodies were elected, but these bodies were not recognized by the parent country. After these attempts were repelled, sometime in force, different kinds of conflicts begun. In United States and Kosovo started a war of independence. In India, it was a non-violent movement of non-cooperation. From this, we can answer to the first question: in order to create a new country, the parent country needs to agree with the independence of the new country. The answer is definitely no. In fact, in most of the cases, the parent country tries to defeat the independence movement, and in many cases there are grave violations of human rights, such as civilian massacres. Also, in support of the unilateral declaration of independence, the International Court of Justice, when asked if the independence of Kosovo was legal, it said, the international law contains no prohibition on declarations of independence. In the same time, we cannot expect that a declaration of independence is in accord with the constitution of the parent country, because in almost any constitution there are provisions which say that the country's territory is indivisible. In this case, any separatist movement is a direct violation of the constitution of the parent country. Regarding a second question, how many people in the new country needs to agree with the independence, the percent can be very different. In India, effectively all the country responded to the Gandhi's call of non-cooperation. In US, there were about 45% patriots, people which wanted independence, 20% loyalists, people loyal to the British Crown, and the remainder of the population kept a low profile. In this case, the active part of the population engaged in obtaining independence was below 50%. About the question, the new country needs to be internationally recognized, there is no law which require a country to be internationally recognized. In this table there are some examples of countries which are not recognized by the entire international community. If a state is not recognized by another state, it means they will not have formal relations but they can have informal ones. Also, a non-recognized country may not be part of international bodies such as United Nations or World Trade Organization, or it may face international embargoes. A non-recognized country may also face supplementary dangers, because it may not be protected by the international law. Now that we have some necessary background, let's see how the Luhansk and Donetsk countries were born. An important key to understand the events is to notice that the Ukraine's population is divided into mainly two ethnic groups, Russians and Ukrainians. The Russians are the majority ethnic group in the east, and the Ukrainians are dominant in the rest of the country. In 2010 Viktor Yanukovych, a pro-Russian president, was elected. It can be seen from the map that his party, figured in blue, was dominant in the east of the country, among the Russian ethnics. In 2013, Yanukovych rejected a pending European Union Association agreement, choosing instead to pursue a Russian loan bailout and closer ties with Russia. This led to demonstrations from the pro-European organizations, which grew bigger and bigger, until Yanukovych was removed from office in 2014. Only from these facts, all would be fine. After all, in any country can be demonstrations, impeachments and so on. The problem was that the removal of Yanukovych from office was not made entirely by Ukrainian forces, but it was made with a massive help from America. For America, Ukraine is a very important regional asset, because it borders both the European Union and Russia, and it was a possible NATO member. To pursue its geopolitical interests in region, until 2014 US invested in Ukraine over $5 billion. Because of the pro-Russian attitude of Yanukovych, if his plans were successful, many of the American efforts would have been erased. The Americans could not afford that, so they openly intervened on the side of the opposition. The then U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs Victoria Nuland and the U.S. Ambassador in Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, took part in demonstrations, so everyone could clearly know what America wants. Also, Victoria Nuland started meeting with opposition figures. After the Euromaidan, with the American help, many of these politicians were put into the highest functions in state. In this way, the Americans made sure that their politics will be followed in Ukraine. Now let's talk a bit more about the American money. From them, over $1.2 billion went to different entities and programs for governing justly and democratically, and investing in people. We do not have a list of these entities, but maybe they include political parties, NGOs, mass media, influencers, and so on. Probably it is safe to assume two things. First, in the American view of democracy, surely it is not included a pro-Russian stance, so no money went on that direction. Instead, probably all the money was for supporting pro-American, pro-NATO, pro-European and pro-LGBT entities. $1.2 billion means 0.65% of the Ukraine's GDP in 2013. To understand the influence of this money in Ukraine, if we scale them to the America's GDP in 2013, it is the equivalent of almost $110 billion. Now we can make an exercise of imagination. In America there is an ongoing debate about alleged interferences of Russia and China in elections. What would America say if someone would discover that Russia and China gave $110 billion to different American entities, in order to promote just and democratic governance? Second, we can assume that when the Americans called, a lot of the entities supported by their money went to help, also because after that they would have high functions in state. Of course this help was not given only from Ukrainian entities, but many governments and mass media throughout the world helped to advance the American democracy in Ukraine. Of course, especially in the eastern Ukraine, which, as we saw, is predominantly pro-Russian, the events surrounding the Euromaidan were perceived as a betrayal. They were viewed as acts of treason and as actions carried with foreign agents to take over the country. Many demonstrations started to take place, and in most of these demonstrations we can see the Russian flag. Sometimes the Ukrainian flag was replaced with the Russian flag on the official buildings. The situation escalated quickly. Crowds of people seized government buildings. The Ukrainian authorities were unable to contain the revolt and some law enforcement agents sided with the crowds. The separatists formed local governments and organized referendums. The results of the referendums were overwhelmingly in the favor of the independents. There were no international observers to validate the referendums, so countries such as Germany and the United States stated that the referendums had no democratic legitimacy, while the Russian government expressed respect for the results and urged a civilized implementation. After the referendums, in each state was held a declaration of independence and they started to implement an autonomous governance. From this moment, we can say that the Luhansk and the Donetsk republics were born. We can see that the creation process was the same as in our previous examples, with America, India and Kosovo. At most, someone can say that the referendums were fake, and the results did not express the real will of the people. If this were the case, some signs would have appeared. For example, large demonstrations against independence would have been held by the pro-Ukrainian people. Another sign would have been a large exodus of people which was against independence. For example, after the American independence, around 60,000 loyalists migrated to other British territories. Between India and Pakistan, after their independences, millions of people were exchanged. In the case of Donbass we did not see either one of these signs, so we must conclude that the referendums expressed the will of the majority. As a result, and based on the international historical precedents, we can conclude that the creation of the Luhansk and Donetsk republics expressed the predominant will of their inhabitants, so we can consider these two entities as countries. Of course, they are recognized by only a few countries, but, as we previously saw, this is not an impediment to their statehood, based on the international law. After the declarations of independence, Ukraine launched the anti-terrorist operation, a military offensive to retake Donbass from separatists. The separatists responded with fire, and the war started. Until February 21, 2022, Russia did not recognize the independence of Luhansk or Donetsk, and also it did not annex them to Russia. It tried to ensure the well-being of the Russian ethnics by proposing some limited form of autonomy, but integrated into Ukraine. This was specified into the Minsk agreements, but these agreements were not respected. Later, Russia tried another agreement, the Normandy format peace talks. Military speaking, the Russian help was very limited, especially in the form of equipment. Russia never acknowledged this help. Also, some thousands of Russian volunteers fought alongside separatists. From 2014 to 2022, the separatists were pushed back by the Ukrainian army, until they remained in about a third from the Donbass territory. In 2021 the situation in Donbass escalated. Both parts, Ukrainian and separatists, used drones and howitzers. The heads of the Donetsk and Luhansk republics, Denis Pushilin and Leonid Pasechnik, asked Russia for help. On February 21, 2022 Russia recognized both Donetsk and Luhansk as independent republics. On February 24, 2022, Russia declared the special military operation and entered in Donbass and in other parts of Ukraine. At this point, we can answer to an important question: is Russia liberator or invader in Donbass? Let's recap some things. According to the historical precedents, Luhansk and Donetsk have every right to be named countries. They held referendums, declared independence and established local governments. Russia recognized them and established formal relations with them. Russia is in Donbass at the formal invitation of the heads of these two republics. We saw how much their territory shrunk because of the Ukraine's anti-terrorist operation. Probably it is safe to assume that without Russia's intervention, in short time these states would have ceased to exist. In this context, Russia also invoked the Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. This article provides for the right of countries to engage in self-defense, including collective self-defense, against an armed attack. There are many law professors which say that the article is not applicable in the Russia's case, for a number of reasons. For example, they said that the Luhansk and Donetsk republics are not recognized by the United Nations, so the article does not apply. On the Russia side, it was pointed out that the same article was also used by America to justify its intervention in Vietnam, even if the South Vietnam was not recognized by the United Nations. In that case, the Americans said that even if the article is about United Nations members, nothing forbids its application for the self-defense of non-members. Taking all these into account, we can say that on the territories of the Luhansk and Donetsk republics, Russia is their ally. Of course, this means that when Russia engages the Ukrainian forces in Donbass, it acts as a liberator, which liberates and gives back these territories to their rightful owners, the Luhansk and Donetsk republics. As we can see from the map, beside Donbass, Russia also entered in other territories, such as Kherson, Zaporizhia and Kharkiv. In these territories there is no other authority than Ukraine and, of course, it did not invite Russia. In the same time, Russia cannot invoke other motives for invasion, such as protecting the population from genocide or other humanitarian reasons. Even if these motives existed, in order to act according with the international law, Russia would have needed a United Nations resolution, which does not exist. In conclusion, for now, in these territories Russia is an invader. Regarding the Russian status as an invader on these territories, there are some important things we need to consider. Remember the map with the pro-Russian Yanukovych election? In these regions the majority ethnic group is Russian, and they welcome Russians. This support is so strong, that they even provide the Russian army with intelligence regarding the Ukrainian army. Many foreign reporters reported on this, and also many Ukraine soldiers complained that they do not feel welcome here. Because of this, SBU conducts sweeping operations to find who is helping the Russians. They check the mobile phones for calls and contacts in Russia. In these regions, the Russians provided a lot of humanitarian help, repaired the essential infrastructure of the cities, such as water, electricity, gas, communications, and started building apartments. The Russians also started to use the ruble as currency and started the payment of social benefits such as pensions. From fall, they want to introduce the Russian education system in schools. Also, the residents are able to obtain a Russian passport in a simplified manner. All these means an accelerated process of integration of these areas into Russia. So, taking all these into account, what will happen in these areas? The Russians say that they will organize referendums, in order to know if the population wants to join Russia. Ukraine said that it will not recognize these referendums, because it considers them illegal, fake and sham. For now, in these areas there are different events, meetings, demonstrations. Some of them are pro-Russian and others are pro-Ukrainian. It is possible that the current situation favors Russia, because on most Russia-held territories it is most likely to return only the pro-Russian refugees, and these will vote in favor of joining Russia. Of course, if these referendums will show a will to join Russia, the Russian forces will be liberators and protectors. Else, the Russian forces will be seen as occupation forces. Thank you for watching this presentation. If you have any comments, I would love to know your opinion. Please consider to like and subscribe. It will help the channel grow. Bye and see you next time.